Okay. So, let's talk about the thing everyone's suddenly talking about, the alleged leaked text connected to Erika Kirk. And the way people are saying this somehow just blew up TPUSA. That's the phrase I keep seeing. Blew up. And already that tells you something. Because when people say that, they're usually not talking about facts yet. They're talking about a feeling. But before any of that, I want to slow this down just a little. Because the internet doesn't do that for us anymore. It sees screenshots, it feels a story coming, and it decides how it feels almost immediately. And once that happens, it's kind of hard to rewind. Screenshots aren't context, virality isn't verification. Those two things get mixed together all the time. So I'm not here to tell you what's true, I don't know yet, and neither do most people talking about this. I'm just here to talk about what's happening. What we know, and I mean what we actually know, is that some text messages claimed to be private started circulating online. That's it. That's the foundation. And once they started circulating, they didn't just stay in one place. They moved. They got reposted, cropped, reframed, passed around by people who weren't part of the conversation at all. And that's usually when things start getting weird. Because the moment something gets labeled a leak, people stop asking questions. They stop asking, where did this come from, or what's missing, or who decided this was the part to show. Instead, they jump straight to conclusions. They assume intent. They assume tone. They assume they understand an entire dynamic based on a few lines on a screen. And suddenly, we're not even talking about what happened anymore. We're talking about what it means, what it represents, what it supposedly proves. And all of that happens before anyone agrees on the basics. That's the part that bothers me. Because what really made this explode wasn't just whatever is in the messages themselves. It was the association, the proximity, the idea that something private might say something bigger about an organization or a culture people already have strong opinions about. That's the spark. That's how a ripple turns into a wave. And once a wave starts, it doesn't really care if the information is verified yet. It just moves. Here's the thing that usually gets skipped in moments like this. When something blows up online, it doesn't automatically mean something was proven. Sometimes it just means the timing was right. The audience was ready. The tension was already there. And when that happens, speculation fills in the gaps faster than truth ever could. That's where I think we are right now. Because there are still basic questions that don't have clear answers yet. Are the messages real? Are they complete? Are they out of context? Who verified them? How were they obtained? Those questions matter way more than the reactions, but reactions are louder, so they take over. And this is where I think it's worth just pausing. Private messages, whether they're real or alleged, were never meant to stand on their own in public. They're fragments, pieces of a longer conversation we don't see. And when you turn fragments into a full story, people get misrepresented, institutions get dragged, and the truth gets flattened into something easier to consume. That doesn't mean nothing happened. It just means we don't actually know what happened yet. And moments like this test us too, not just the people involved. Us, the audience. They test whether we're still able to sit with uncertainty without immediately filling it with assumptions. And honestly, that's hard, especially online. What I noticed almost immediately was how fast the focus shifted. It went from what are these messages to what does this say about the organization? Almost instantly. 1 second, it's about private texts. The next second, it's about credibility, reputation, collapse. And that leap happens before anything is actually settled. That's not random. That's how virality works. Outrage doesn't need confirmation. It just needs momentum. And once momentum starts, context is usually the first thing to disappear. Nobody wants to be the person saying, let's slow down, because slowing down gets interpreted as defending something, even when it's not. Even when it's just thinking. And I want to say this clearly, Because it matters. Saying we don't know yet is not the same thing as saying nothing happened. Those two ideas get mixed up constantly. You can take something seriously and still admit uncertainty. In fact, that's usually the more honest position. But honesty doesn't trend. Certainty does, especially loud certainty. So people start choosing sides based on vibes instead of facts, based on who they already trust or who they already don't. And suddenly the conversation isn't really about the messages anymore. It's about identity, about us and them, about proving a point that existed long before any screenshots showed up. And once it gets there, the details almost stop mattering. That's the uncomfortable part. Because if the messages turn out to be incomplete or misrepresented, the damage doesn't just reverse. And if they turn out to be accurate, the chaos still didn't help anyone understand them better. Either way, rushing to react usually does more harm than clarity ever could. I keep thinking about how private communication used to mean something, how there was at least an understanding that context mattered, that you couldn't fully understand a situation or a relationship by reading a few lines on a screen. Now, a screenshot gets treated like a verdict. And once it's labeled a leak, people stop asking who leaked it, why now, what's missing, and who benefits from how it's framed. Those questions feel inconvenient, so they get skipped, but they're usually the most important ones. Because information doesn't just appear, it moves. And how it moves tells you a lot. So when people say this situation blew up an organization, I think it's worth asking what that actually means. Did facts get established? Or did trust get shaken because perception moved faster than verification? Those are very different things. And we're at a point now where perception alone can do real damage, even before anything is proven. That should make all of us uncomfortable, not just the people involved, because it means we're reacting to fragments and calling it understanding. That's not accountability. That's acceleration. And acceleration flattens everything. So maybe the most honest place to land right now isn't outrage or dismissal. Maybe it's restraint. Maybe it's saying, this matters enough to get right, instead of this matters enough to react to immediately. Because if we lose the ability to tell the difference, every situation becomes the same cycle. New names, same noise, same rush, and nothing really improves except how fast we move on. I don't know how this is going to resolve. Nobody really does yet. Anyone telling you they have the full answer right now is either guessing or selling certainty they don't actually have. What I do know is this: how we handle moments like this says more about our culture than the content of the messages ever could. So I'm watching. I'm waiting. And I'm not rushing to a conclusion that hasn't earned itself yet. Because sometimes the most responsible thing you can say is also the least satisfying. We don't know enough yet. Yeah. And the more I sit with it, the more I realize this isn't really about this one situation at all. It just happens to be the moment everything's projecting itself onto right now. Because we've trained ourselves to treat every new controversy like a final exam. Like we're supposed to have the right answer immediately, or else we failed somehow. And that pressure doesn't come from truth-seeking. It comes from performance, from being seen, from being on the right side of whatever the internet decided the right side was that day. And I keep thinking about how exhausting that is. It doesn't leave any room for nuance. It doesn't leave room for people to say, I'm still processing this, or I don't have enough information yet, without getting dragged for it. Everything has to be definitive. Everything has to be loud. Everything has to be moralized immediately. But real life doesn't work like that. Real understanding takes time. It takes back and forth. It takes moments where you go, wait, maybe I need to rethink that. And those moments don't happen when everyone's yelling. They happen when things get quiet. That's why I keep coming back to the idea of permission. Permission to slow down, permission to not post, permission to not react, permission to let the dust settle before you decide what you actually think. Because here's the thing. Most of us aren't investigators. We're not lawyers. We don't have access to full records, raw data, or private context. What we have are fragments delivered through platforms that reward speed and emotion. And expecting ourselves, or anyone, to arrive at truth through that system instantly is kind of unrealistic. And I don't say that to excuse anything. I say it because I think we've confused reaction with responsibility. Responsibility sometimes looks boring. It looks like waiting. It looks like holding off on language like exposed or destroyed or finished until you actually know what you're talking about. It looks like asking boring questions that don't go viral, like who confirmed this and what's missing and what happens if this is incomplete. Those questions don't get applause, but they matter. And I think that's what I want this space to be about. Not conclusions, but process. Not certainty, but care. Not rushing to be right, but trying to be fair. Because if we lose that, if every situation becomes a rush to judgment, then eventually none of it means anything. The outrage burns itself out. The trust erodes. And people stop believing anything at all. Not because they don't care, but because they're tired of being pulled in opposite directions every week. So, yeah. I'm okay sitting here for a bit longer. I'm okay not tying this up with a bow. I'm okay letting this episode end without a verdict. If you're listening and you feel that same tension, the urge to decide mixed with the feeling that maybe it's too soon, that's not confusion. That's discernment trying to do its job. And honestly, we don't give that enough credit anymore. So for now, I'm just going to keep watching, keep listening, keep waiting for information that can actually hold weight instead of just heat. And when something solid shows up, when it's clear, verified, and earned, we'll talk about it. Not louder, just clearer. Until then, yeah, I think it's okay to let the moment breathe.